Now, let's talk about AAA or our authentication server. Okay, so let's have a review. Our supplicant, this is our client. We have our authenticator, which is our NAD or network access or network authentication device. And we have our authentication server. This is actually our AAA server. Now, this authentication server commonly or oftenly use a protocol called radius. And let me do this. I will move this server because we need more space on the right side of our screen. Okay, so this is our radius server connecting to our switch, our network address device, and network access device or our authenticator. Now, our authentication server is the centralized system responsible for verifying user identities. This is to access or this is to determine access permissions and also logging user activities in our network environment. So how it works is this. When the supplicant or the client authenticates, it's actually gonna match authentication server database. And like what I mentioned, this runs in a radius protocol. Now, how about the username and the password and the database and the MAC address? Well, it can use local database. It can also use it can also use the integration to AD or Active Directory. So if you already have an existing Active Directory where username and password and MAC address are already stored, you can integrate this to our radio server. So I'm gonna add here AD. I'm gonna add integration. There. And AD, normally it knows the username and the groups of the accounts. All right, I will also need to move this because again, we need space. All right, I'm gonna move it here because we will be needing space on the right side. Okay, so I would also like to highlight this. Radio server or our authentication server doesn't only validate the user identification. It also creates a policy to know what level of privilege should we provide to the user. So I'm gonna add here policy, or let's just call it authorization policy. Now there is an authentication policy, but it's pretty straightforward. Use the local database or use the AD. Okay, so we're gonna focus more on the authorization policy. Now in our authorization policy, we're gonna create based on groups. So if the user that has been authenticated, meaning the username and password has already validated, which group are you a member of? And based on the groups, that's where we will determine what authorization we will provide to the user. So I will create our first rule. If group is employee, I'm gonna add here employee. We're gonna use what we called authorization profile, and we're going to create authorization profile called MVLAN. Okay, so let me move this further because we need more space. Okay, there. And then I will also move this. All right. All right, I'm going to name this. I'm gonna name this MVLAN. Meaning I'm providing a special VLAN to this authorized user. And I will also add another another rule for our authorization policy. I'm gonna create a rule. If the group is equal to guest, we're going to use an authorization profile or the action named guest tackle. Tackle means downloadable ACL. All right, next. We already associated our authorization profile, which is the action of the rule, but how does it work? What is the configuration or the settings of this authorization profile? Okay, so let's create the authorization profile. So I'm gonna add here authorization profile, and we only have two in our current settings. We have EMP VLAN, or the employee VLAN, and we have the guest DACL. Now this is pretty straightforward. This is just VLAN 10. Employee VLAN is VLAN 10, or we'll just use VLAN 100. So this is VLAN 100, VLAN 100, and let's say the network would be 192.168.100.0. That's its network. All right, now the employee VLAN or the EMP VLAN is VLAN 100. I'm gonna create another authorization profile, and the name will be guest DACL. Now the guest DACL is permit all zeros, okay, which means internet only. Let me highlight here, internet only access, and I'm gonna deny some network. In this case, I will deny traffic towards to 192.168.100.0/24, or you can also deny any traffic towards to other private network. Okay, so our configuration is already in place. Just keep in mind that the 802.1x protocol is on the client side, or process on the client side, while on the server side, we process radius. On the next video, we're gonna talk about NAC in action.